It is time for
VloggerDome, the TV show. Episode 3. This month's topic is Education Reform. Buy Some Brains. Featuring Glynos. Introducing Vox Neruda. And with special guest, Mr. Natural.
Alright, for this third edition of VloggerDome, the subject is education reform, and really one specific reform, which is to change the kind of entire mindset of the educational system. Now, there's this traditional idea that it's more efficient to force kids to learn than it is to encourage kids to learn. So pay people to force information into a kid's head rather than some way pay kids to learn. So it's basically that simple a proposal, that we should basically just pay kids instead of paying teachers. That for the average student, it costs for 12 years of education over $100,000, and that if we took half that amount as prize money for passing a GED, a high school equivalency exam, with a competency test, that we could greatly enhance, incentivize, get much better results. Socially, just entirely change the dynamic in terms of giving the disenfranchised and the hopeless reason to hope, and real hard incentive to get with the program, become civilized, intelligent human beings. Change the whole social dynamic in probably many ways, in the sense that it'll now be sensible and rational and socially accepted to be somebody who is hungry for knowledge and thrives on learning, instead of calling them nerds, and social outcasts, to something to be almost to see as the new hero, people who can acquire knowledge and use it effectively in the world. It really could change everything in terms of getting rid of so many of the negative elements of our social structure, by changing what we admire and changing what we strive to be. And it all starts with those early incentives. I got this cat bothering me, but and the cats they're hard to incentivize because they can't understand. They're just animals. So you often have to use a stick rather than a carrot to encourage an animal or discourage an animal from doing the wrong thing. But kids aren't dumb animals. Once they start learning, they can learn a lot, okay, and quickly. And they can be incentivized to do that. And it just makes sense to take advantage of that, to get every bit of potential out of them. Out of all of us. I'm speaking from my own personal experience. The 12 years of education I got, the public education, was what I consider the most wasted years of my life. Because, it was a system that was just obnoxious to my sensibilities, that insulted me every day, and gave me no incentive to do any of the work. And it is work to learn, and we should appreciate that. Recognize that simple fact. So there's so many things you can blame. I mean, it's just these traditional ways we have of doing things, and clearly technology has changed the game. We don't have blacksmiths anymore. We don't have stagecoach drivers, and frankly, in this world, we don't need information providers. We can put the information online on cable TV for free. We can buy the best teachers in the world to teach it. We can videotape them. and we can give it to all citizens for free, and we can pay kids to absorb it, and then we can test them to see if they did so, and if they did so, they get paid. Really quite simple. I mean, I can make some sort of personal affirmation and say that yes, you could torture me in hell for eternity if such a plan wouldn't work, if it wouldn't greatly enhance social structure. It wouldn't have all positive impacts in terms of outcome, create high school graduates at maybe 12 years old. It would do nothing but make a better world. My confidence is complete. I would risk anything on this bet that if our society would just grow up and realize that, times change, and old institutions, it's time for them to go away and for us to do things more efficiently, with knowledge that there is waste in the system, there's silly redundancy. We're paying performance artists all over the country to say the same things day in and day out over and over again, and it's just a waste. And the idea of not recognizing that a pound of prevention, is worth an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. To give kids an incentive not to do the wrong things, to create an incentive for them to, do well, do good, is going to cost you so much less than it costs to fix the mess they can make by being ignorant, and have wasted and squandered their potential. I mean, that squandered potential is expensive, and we see it in society. We see it in the social outcomes. I don't have to name names, but you can go to a lot of places in this country and you can see it. You can see the squalor that those wasted youths create. And we can prevent it with a tiny percentage. We can save money and prevent it. That's the irony of this. If we paid kids this $50,000, you'd have $50,000 more to create some sort of daycare system, some sort of network where families could share the responsibility of providing caretakers for their kids during the day and all that kind of stuff. And you don't need these big giant institutions. You don't need this educational industrial complex. You can let people take care of their own kids and let society create an incentive for those kids to become educated. And we're talking about, for many people, this $50,000 means a down payment on a house. And so instead of getting out of high school with nothing, facing a world of minimum wage wages and paying high rents, they might be able to start owning a home. And if they get some college education, again, we can do the same thing for college education. There's no need to have colleges spread all over the country and to keep all of this information and this knowledge cloistered in these institutions. We should have a federal college, and we should provide all of the lectures and the instruction for free, online, on cable TV, and any individual who acquires the knowledge and the information and is willing to take the required testing. Some of it might be extensive for some subjects, but regardless, the testing to make sure they have competency, that should be all that's required to be competent in the field, is acquisition of knowledge and being able to perform the skill. And this would be huge, much more, just a much better world we could create with these kinds of incentives. Having college graduates that instead of being in debt, have a home, a mortgage and a life instead of, a mess of debt and dismal prospects. And again, for all the people, older people, at any time, if their job is becoming antiquated and they can't be supported on it anymore, they got to find a new skill. They'll be able to find it and acquire it on their leisure time, at their pace, and it's just, this is nothing but enhancements, nothing but value added to human existence by just changing this old traditional notion that forcing people to do something is a better idea than incentivizing them to do something. It's in a powerful world, incentive, so I guess I'll deal with that one next. But enough for this segment. Thank you very much.
And now it's time for Adventures of an Antinatalist.
Hello. What's happening, shit breath? Oh, hey. Mommy just told me you got into an argument with some boy about not wanting to have kids, shot him, and the police let you off. Yeah, that's pretty unbelievable, isn't it? Fucking right it is. How'd that happen then? The police officer was some kind of solipsist. Fucking hell's a solipsist? It's just a kind of moron that pretends that real things are not real. Look, I don't care a fuck about that, but I want to know why you don't want to have kids. Oh, no. Can we speak about this later? You're right then, Bet. You still coming over after or what? Yeah, I'll just get on a bus, and I'll be there in about an hour. Alright then, Bet. I'll see you after, alright? Yeah, bye. Ta-da, Bet. I heard you were pregnant again, Angela. Yeah. Congratulations, love. Thanks, Bert. That's alright, love. How many's that now, then? 7. You're fucking kidding me. I think that's bloody marvellous. Reckless cunt.
Adventures of an Antinatalist will be right back.
Our current education system is archaic and grossly inefficient. Created in an era of low technology and complete geographic isolation, the system has little rational relation to the system we would create today. It is time to let go of the traditional model and remake a new system that takes full advantage of new world technology. The current system finances redundancy and waste by paying teachers to perform rather than students. Learning is the hard work that needs doing, and the learners should be fairly incentivized to do it. By contrast, highly paid personal performing educators are an unnecessary artifact of the world where information had few alternative means of distribution. It is proposed that we replace the current 4 through 12 grade brick and mortar education system with a reverse incentivized electronic system that pays learners, not teachers. One national school should be created that teaches all subjects through all levels of advancement. The school should be staffed with the best teachers and all content video recorded and made publicly available for free through the internet and cable television. A prize of $60,000 should be awarded when a student achieves a passing grade on a high school equivalency examination. The prize, although substantial, would only be a portion of the money saved if we no longer built and maintained brick and mortar school infrastructure. It is contended that such a system would produce better equipped high school graduates much quicker and more efficiently, with the side benefit of providing children substantial incentive not to waste their time on sports, drugs, and other socially useless, if not destructive, activities.
We should be paid just to put up with you, 'cause we can't learn from you, so why not pay me too? The future needs my mind to work properly, so won't you invest in me and make education free?
Greetings. Say, kids, what time is it? It's time for Miss Emily's World Domination Happy Hour Children's Reading Circle and Mind Clearance Protocol. Today we'll learn our ABCs. Won't you scream along with me?
ABC. A is an autopsy. B the bones. C is criminal. D is the drone. E is execrable. F is for fell. G is ghastly. H is but hell. I is the idiot. J is his jest. K makes karma. L's always less. M is the money. N is in need. O's ostracized. P is just peeved. Q has gone queer. R is all rusty. S is for shit. T is for trusty. U as in ugly. V as in Venus. W's her what. X is for xenos. Y carries yours. Z is a zoo. Think it literate. Bloody screw you.
VloggerDome proudly welcomes as our guest this month the legendary Mr. Natural. Mr. Natural is both an artist and a scientist and has bridged these disciplines throughout his life. In the 50s, he was a child star, singing and dancing weekly on Chicago's local Little Rascals TV show. Mr. Natural began playing accordion and French horn as a child. He continued to play French horn at the Prosser High School and through the 60s in the nationally acclaimed Vanguard Drum and Bugle Corps. Later, he met composer Bill Russo and played the first amplified jazz French horn with Stan Kenton's band. An audiophile and electronic music aficionado, Mr. Natural also pursued a career in research and development as an electronic engineer at Warwick Electronic and Sears Silvertone. It was when he came to San Francisco, crossing paths with Janis Joplin and the artist Robert Crumb in The Haight-Ashbury, that he became known as Mr. Natural. Here, he discovered his flair and passion for teaching and for translating complex subjects into layman's terms. After inventing the intervalometer and developing a novel way to teach music with Lin Vane in the 90s, Mr. Natural has learned to play almost every musical instrument.
Alright, for this segment on education reform, we have Mr. Natural, a character from like the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s and such, based on a character, the underground comic character, Mr. Natural. So anything else? He's also a teacher, music, and anything else to say about yourself, Mr. Natural?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mr. Natural. Yeah, I started teaching in Chicago back in the 60s, actually, and then when I moved to San Francisco, I didn't have enough accreditation at that time, and I had to go back to school and take some classes, and then got my teaching degree here, and then I've been teaching here in San Francisco since '66. Yeah.
And you're mostly self-taught, right? I mean, there wasn't anybody who made Mr. Natural, right? You're kind of self-made.
I'm didactic, like all the real geniuses in the world.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So we basically agree on this general subject of, you know, the education system. Maybe we're just paying the wrong end, or we're rewarding the wrong people. The students do the work, the students need the reward, they need the incentive. And having teachers trying to cram it down their throats for money doesn't make much sense when you could just pay the kids to learn it for money.
No, you get what I call the jackass. You know, what happens is people get stubborn just because they can be stubborn. And that's not really a way to motivate people. You know, it starts with, back in the 30s and 40s when they put together public education, they decided to use the Pavlovian or the behavioral model. So they felt everything was based on either positive reward or negative incentives or competition. And so you're building an entire knowledge base based on that faulty assumption about people. And they've pretty much institutionalized that down through the decades, and that's what you get even today. And there's been some reform, but it swings back and forth. then you've got the added problem of the politics of the school. You've got the unions. You've got, you know, the politics of the teachers, which get in the way, the fundraising, and all the rest of that stuff. And it just, that's why I left public education, because I found myself doing everything but teaching. And I wanted to teach. You know?
Yeah, I would argue that not only will it save a lot of money, like say if you just took 1/2 of the money we spend now on education, which would be about $50,000 or $60,000 on average, that's half the amount, and use that as a prize for a kid to pass a GED, you know, a high school equivalency exam, that you would have high school graduates, you know, at the age of 12. There would be a huge incentive for kids, because that's real money. I mean, they have tried systems where they give kids rewards, but they're usually rewards that come to a glass of Coke or something. Yeah, well, a can of Coke isn't going to get a week's work out of somebody.
Yeah, bribing doesn't work either.
Yeah, well, bribing, I think I think bribery does work. It just has to be a very good bribe. That's all.
Well, see, but the thing with money is you can buy your own bribe, right? Giving someone a gift, you know, and trying to figure out is this the thing that fits them. So that's part of the problem with incentives in schools. You have to make sure your incentives are politically correct. You've got to, you know, run it past the principal.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah, they used to have like prize
money.
Yeah,
you
contests.
Give them digits in their bank account, and then they can spend it on what they need. You know, that makes more sense to me. And I found out when I did this experiment myself back in the 70s that it had many more profound repercussions than I even thought. You don't have to worry about positive or negative incentives because the money is both that. It's both positive and negative incentives. In the 70s, 1973, there was a lot of alternative schools beginning here in San Francisco and opening up across the country. People wanted to try educating their children themselves, but they didn't know anything but the old system. So it was amazing when I went to a lot of the alternate schools I looked at, the parents just instituted another kind of public school, and sometimes it was more repressive and also dumber. At the same time, back then, people were starting to get education online, sort of more or less. That was selling discs or sets of cassette tapes or stuff like that that would educate people, and you saw that starting to happen. The whole DeVry Tech and these universities you see advertised all the time. That began happening, and people were willing to spend money in private institutions or people outside of the institution because they felt they were being educated better or they were getting more of what they wanted. But I decided when I went to the Board of Ed and wanted to start a school, they didn't like the idea of me opening a high school. And when I told them that I wanted to pay the students, they laughed at me. They actually thought I was out of my mind. So I made them a bet. The only way I could get my credentials from them and get, at that time, I think it was Howard Clay was the head of the Board of Ed here in San Francisco. I made him a bet that if he gave me 14 of the most delinquent students in the school and gave me 6 months, I'd give him good attendance records after that. And so he had Mr. Goldblatz, the attendance officer at that time, allowed me to start the school, and he would come every day to take attendance and see what happened and see what I was doing at the process. Gary, after 6 months, every single child showed up every single day. We had perfect attendance. We had perfect attendance records. And it was simple. They got paid for coming to school, first of all. If they were late, they were dock pay, just like anybody else was dock pay. If they did extracurricular stuff or they taught a class, they were paid for that. They were paid for teaching classes. It was amazing in how often I could step out of the way and give a student I knew that knew English just as well as I did a chance to teach other kids and reinforce what they themselves knew, be able to describe it and explain it to others.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of disturbing that, you know, when you could actually create the example, you know, you can actually prove the case, but the institution is so settled in, you know, the vested interests are already own the system and they're going to resist the change. So it has to be more than just right. You know, people really do have to force good things to happen sometimes, because there are forces that don't want it to happen. So
they went out of their way to block us, actually, and I had to actually have more accreditation than anybody else needed to open a school. I mean, there were hippy dippies that were opening up schools, you know, that were based on sitting around meditating all day, and that was all right with them, you know. But when I said, oh, I'm just going to pay the students to come to school, and we're going to do it normal, we're going to have a normal school, we're going to take on the 38 subjects, we're going to go through the 4 years of curriculum, you know, we'll do all the testing, we'll do the GED at the end and find out how the kids do. And it was absolutely amazing at how often they kept throwing roadblocks in front of me, constantly trying to stop that process. They didn't want us to prove it was feasible. The amazing thing was, it worked better than I thought. We had those 14 kids that first came to that school were the most truant kids in the system. There was one kid, Jeff, I'll call him Jeff Runaway. Jeff Runaway was a professional escape artist. His parents would take him to school, walk him to the 3rd floor, get him into the classroom, would stand outside of the door while the classroom started, and then would leave. And they'd get a phone call 20 minutes later saying, your son escaped school. He opened the windows, crawled down the drain pipe, and ran away. I mean, this kid was an escape artist you wouldn't believe. One day, Mr. Goldblatz was there taking attendance, and he noticed that Jeff had not come to class yet. He was late. And he started razzing me about my perfect attendance record. And at that moment, Jeff comes through the door with a cast on his leg. And it turns out that he used to run to school every day. And on his way to school that day, he got hit by a car. He dragged himself to the hospital, had the cast put on, and came to school an hour and a half late and apologized when he came through the door. That's the kind of motivation money can do.
yeah, and you know, it's just so obvious in some ways that we all are motivated. You know, it's crude to say, but yes, it's the generic universal gift is money. Okay, it does have this intrinsic and fundamental value. You don't have to depend on what the person wants or what even you want. It's not, you know, it's even more valuable than actually getting something. Because it's always the promise of it. It's not even the actual something, right? I can imagine money being anything, and at the same time also I never have it. Even when I have the money, I still don't have the thing. So the value's still there. So I can't even have the disappointment of the day after syndrome or some other thing. The idea of the promise of the pot of gold, so to speak. You know, the leprechaun gold. It's just this idea that money has this real intrinsic fundamental power to motivate us, and the real argument is that, yeah, okay, this is a little bit manipulative with kids, but kids need to be manipulated sometimes. They don't know what's good for them until they get a good taste of it, and you don't want to shove it in their mouth. You want to get them to start eating it for, you know, for what they think are their reasons. Not because you're forcing them to, not because you're playing the game, but because they're going to own you in the end. And I think that's really important in motivating. And once you get a kid hungry for knowledge, you're not going to have to pay them in the end. I mean, that's the irony of it, right? Is that, you know, a system like this, you could almost not give them the money in the end, and it might be all right with the kids because they're going to realize the real gift was realizing how valuable knowledge is.
VloggerDome will be back with more from Mr. Natural and Amendum very soon.
Education should be an all-you-can-eat buffet, and one that the entire human race is invited to dine in for free. Every man, woman, and child should be encouraged to sit at the round table of learning and feast. Great delicacies of understanding should be offered on huge platters, succulent appetizers of comprehension, delicious entrees of scholarship, and copious desserts of cognition should be served breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Kids not only eat for free, this cafeteria will pay them for their appetites to be inspired. Hungry minds and thirsty intellects need to be fed. Learning is the only sane obsession in this insane world, the only truly remarkable gluttony, the only sexy corpulence, and the only rational addiction. So salivate, be ravenous, gorge, consume with voracity. But never forget, though your cravings may have made your palate well refined, Though your binges may have made you a gourmand of the mind, you simply do not own the restaurant. Each guest must in turn set new tables for new guests, making sure that all tools of consumption are in place, that the forks and knives and spoons of erudition are available, safe, effective, and most of all free. Don't insult the privilege of knowing by not setting more tables. Never allow anyone to hold ransom the intellectual treasures of the universe.
Alright, the word for this segment is incentive. Yeah, it's kind of important. Yeah, ideally, knowledge would be its own reward, right? But we know for kids, I know when I was a kid, that wasn't realistically going to be understood. And there needed to be a more practical, sorry, distraction. Cats. Yeah. It needs to be something more practical. And so, you've got to create some sort of way to initiate desire. And once you inspire it, you won't be able to stop it. And when somebody's hungry for knowledge, then you've won the game. And to create that hunger, sometimes you have to artificially sweeten the deal. You have to create something, a kind of food that'll make it worthwhile. And you have to give something an incentive. It has to get a reward. For the cat wouldn't come over here if I didn't do this. So it's not, I guess in a way, it's not to my advantage, but it certainly works. We are Pavlovian dogs in a sense, and we're going to do things based on what we're conditioned to do, what we're incentivized to do. And so it works in the real world every day. People are paid a salary to do work. They're paid a salary to risk their life. They're paid to do things, and kids work by the same mechanisms. And we basically force a march out of them, and it's all a very negatively framed institution. I effectively thought of school as jail. And I was effectively being punished for something, in a sense, in my psychology. That's how my psychology interpreted it. And so there was nothing positive that was going to happen there. It was a wrong attitude, a bad attitude, and I wish I had been born at a technically more advanced time when people would better understand that there's more efficiency in rewarding positive behavior, and that force is never a first choice, it's a last choice. The first choice is to create incentives for the right kind of behavior, to give people a reason not to play basketball, and instead open a book, or more realistically nowadays open an internet page or watch some video. And that's the new model. It should be the new model. It's the rational model. If you were going to construct a system today based on the technology that exists today, I don't think, if you're honest with yourself, you'd invent schools and teachers. I think you'd come up with a different idea based on all the technology that's available. And but anyway, incentives, it's important. Yeah, really important. So, enough said.
Most people, they aren't able to overcome the propaganda of their youth. They're born into a religion and born into a whole psychology of what life means and what's valuable, and they get sucked right into it, and they can't go anywhere from that starting point. But we do know that you throw a little bit of a marble in their way, a little something for them to trip over in that process, and they will be liberated. Their intelligence will be liberated, and they will look at the world. And I'm going to argue to you, if anybody honestly looks at the world, they're not going to draw any other conclusion but that, yeah, this is really too messy. It's too delicate, it's too fine a thing for our clumsy hands to control. We're just not competent to play with something that's valuable.
And now back to Adventures of an Anti-Natalist.
Excuse me, mate. Yeah? Did you just call Angela a reckless cunt? Yeah, what the fuck is she doing, having so many kids? That's none of your bloody business, boy bach. It's just fucking ridiculous. 7 kids, 7 different fathers, no money, no job, the intellectual capacity of a plastic fucking spoon. What hope do those kids have? Listen, bud, it's her life, right? She can do whatever the fuck she wants to. She can do whatever she wants to with her life, yeah. If she wants to live like a pig in shit, that's up to her. But should she really be making 7 other people do it? What's he saying, Bert? He wants to know why you have so many kids, Angela. Stupid boy. I know why. Tell him it's 'cause all the cum to go up my cunt. I don't think that's what he means, Angela. Oh, innit? No, see, what it is, Angela, he's saying it's like not right that you have so many kids. Any kids, actually. But you gotta have kids. Why? Why do you have to have kids? Tell me one bad thing that would happen if you didn't have kids. I'd really miss them. Yeah, but if you hadn't had kids, then they wouldn't be here now for you to miss. Yeah, and if they weren't here, I'd really miss them. Yeah, but you wouldn't be able to miss something that had never come into existence. I don't get it. Well, do you miss your 10th child, for example? I haven't got a 10th one. Exactly, so you don't miss it then, do you? I don't understand how. Just close your eyes for a second. Right-o. Now think of one legitimate, non-selfish reason as to why a person is ethically justified in reproducing. Be aware that stating that you're able to do something isn't the same as justifying it, and also the fact that a lot of people do it and have always done it is also... Next stop, please drive.
And now back to our conversation between Mr. Natural and Inmendum.
Right, and as I mentioned to you in the past, the surprise to me is when you see how they are handling money in a new way, it has real value, because that money is based on their personal work product. It's the sweat and guts of their asses. That means something to them. Then when they spend it, they do not spend it foolishly, so they figure out what a dollar means. And that extends into other things, like only using enough intellect to learn what you need rather than overstudying. That also means that when you give a gift to somebody, you learn to receive that gift so it has value of the other person, rather than saying, oh, thanks, I've always wanted that, or it's about time. These ideas of value start cropping up in other ways, in the way in which they're interacting socially, in terms of how much value they take the subject matter itself. They can see the intrinsic value an idea has rather than what it can buy. And it's interesting how this value creeping in changed their behavior, changed their relationship with their parents, changed their interactions as citizens within the community. And for me, 40 years later, I'm still in contact with half of the original 14 of those kids, and I have had the opportunity to see how it's changed their entire lives. They've gotten married, they've had children, and they've taken those same values, and they do the same thing with their own kids now. They make their kids work for the money. They teach their kids real value, and they don't just give things away or just take things.
Yeah, well, that's sort of what happened, and I guess in me, this idea occurring to me was what was the big thing missing, because yeah, I kind of just slobbed my way through school. I just did the bare minimum, whatever I had to do to get by, and without any passion for it at all. And I did see that later in life as a huge missed opportunity. I blame it both on me and the institution. The institution did nothing to, give me any incentive to care. And but I did work when I was a kid. From the time I was 11, I had jobs like delivering newspapers and cutting grass and shoveling snow, and it did give you an understanding of money. Saving money became a rational thing to do. These are all really good incentive mechanisms, and I think that's really important for a kid to learn too. So that's the second bonus of this thing, is that they're going to learn the real world economy earlier, And that's because kids do live in a fake world. You know, a lot of them don't live in the real world because they have no sense of what it costs and what work is and what burden is.
Oh yeah, I always get a kick out of when I'm in a store and some kids pointing at the most expensive thing in the store asking their parents to get it, and then start having a hissy fit when they can't, and the parents can't seem to explain to them about value. They can't get through to the kid about that money is my work. It doesn't mean anything to a child that's been given something their whole life. So they need to work. They need to do something that they can take pride in, that you can put a dollar's value on, which they can then convert into whatever reward that suits their addiction. So it's like, you know.
Yeah. So another institutional problem I might bring up is the way that we acquire this knowledge. I also remember that, you know, in school I would sneak my way by, because you just say all you have to do is pass this week's test.
Right.
You know, so you don't have to really learn the material. You just have to get away. You have to learn it enough to get by on a test. And the great thing I think about having a test at the end, it's great to make sure a kid's getting it, you know what I mean, to progressively test as they're going. Wouldn't be any problem. I don't have any problem with that. But you really need some final test where you're not going to get any help. You're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to know the answers and how to find the answers. And you might have learned it 4 years ago, and you're still going to have to know it. And I think that's I think the idea of, I think even kids in regular school should have to take GEDs. They should have to take a test that basically tests for your equivalent knowledge.
Well, as an alternative school, that was part of the deal. None of the kids could actually graduate or get accreditation from the school unless they took the GED, and they had to take it and pass. And some of them preferred actually to go into the service, into the Army, and took the GED there because they were able to then get certain kind of training for electronics, the things that they wanted as well. So the bottom line was GED was absolutely the bottom line that you have to be considered, you know, accredited or have a certain level of knowledge. What I've always objected to, though, is the way in which the knowledge is given across. It's always delivered in a linear fashion. And people don't always think linearly. You actually have several different ways in which people relate through their five senses. Some people are very tactile oriented. Some people are very imaginative. Some people are very audio oriented. And I find if you want to convey certain knowledge to people, you have to find out what tactile sense they're the most attached to and sort of deliver it via that system.
Well,
and so one size does not fit all. You can't deliver the information exactly the same way to everybody.
Right, and mood is also important. You know, you get into patterns of where you're in the mood to do something, and even as a kid, you could be like, you know, maybe mathematics intrigues you for 2 weeks, and that's what you'd like to devote your time to because you find it very interesting. And I almost found that to be a huge conflict, you know, just in being a kid when I was trying to learn some things. Because some things you need to think about them more than you're really allowed to, because I still have an English assignment, or I have a history assignment, or I have some other assignment I have to do, so I can't work on this one. You know, and so you're distracting your brain from even doing it in a coherent manner where it completely learns something, you know, in one packet. I mean, this idea of multitasking education might not be a very good idea. The multitask should be by week or by month rather than a daily dose of a little bit of all these different subjects, which could be very dangerous to, I think, very destructive to the learning process rather than constructive.
Yeah, they also have a very fixed timeline with each of these subjects, you know, and they go from A to Z. And I've also seen people who come in not knowing a subject get about a third of the way in, and there's one concept they do not get. And so they get stuck there. And by the time they finally figure it out, the class has already moved all the way up to P already, and now they're playing catch-up. And you never really graduate a class feeling as if you've really totally grokked a subject, that you're in charge of it. You always feel as if you're just living by the next coin, the next moment, the next thing, you know. I cheated my way through high school. I cannot spell to this day because a half an hour before every class, I would sit down and study that spelling list while I'm drinking a lot of orange juice to raise my IQ. I'd go in and I'd take that test, and I swear to you, 10 minutes after that test was taken, I couldn't spell one of the words that was on that damn list. But I got through with straight A's in high school, and to this day, I can't spell to save my life. But I figured out how to cheat the system.
Well, that's what it comes down to. Yeah, and I had a very similar experience. I don't know whether it's dyslexia or what it is, but yeah, definitely spelling. I was way behind. Switching states and all that kind of stuff. Lots of reasons, perhaps. But yeah, you just compensate. And then some of that the system should notice. You'd say, even why didn't even the system notice that? And if I had to actually do some. If I was required to take a certain kind of test, maybe I would have known that I would have to have more proficiency. So I would have had to fix it if I knew something was on the line. So if I knew my 50 grand was on the line, I'm pretty sure I could have learned how to spell a lot better.
Well, as a teacher too, though, I look at those things now and I see them as the potential for genius. If a kid can figure out how to skirt the rules or get around something, there's some thinking going on there. Now what we need to do is figure out how to direct it in the right direction. Put it into something socially useful or something that's good for the person, instead of being mischievous. So I've always seen kids who act up in school as being bored of school and probably too smart to be there. Kids who are running away from school constantly but keep going back, and then they run away and they keep going back. There's a part of them that feels that they know socially in their life they're going to need to be educated, so they keep going back, but they just can't stand being there. They're bored spitless. So the first thing was to engage their brains and to almost overload everybody. The second thing is find out what interests the kids had and allow them to explore those, even to the cost of other things. So like you were talking about mathematics. I had a kid who had a 4.3 grade average when he was in high school for almost 2.5 years, and parents were always putting pressure on me, and I wouldn't let them do that, because I knew that when the kid was ready, I'd have to get out of his way. And one day he took a course in history of mathematics and saw it from a completely different point of view that was interesting to him, and then I used that to feed him. And Gary, in 3 months, when he took the test, he went up to an 11.9. In 3 months, he caught up from from 5th grade grammar school all the way through high school in just 3 months. That's what kids are designed to do, that they have that type of focus, and they have all this body chemistry and all this preconditioning, helping them do that. We kind of peter out as we get older. I wish I had the ability to do these miracles that I see kids do when they're interested in something.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't underrate yourself. You did learn music. You learned how to read it, write it, and play it on many instruments. From your mid-50s?
Yeah, in my 50s, I decided that after I had invented a new form of teaching music, that I needed to experiment on me. And I always experimented on my students, but some of my students aren't as good a student as I am. And I know I can be a very good student. So I did that, and in 11 years, I taught myself to play over 50 musical instruments using my method. So I know my method works, and now I'm seeing the product of it, because my students are leaving here actually learning how to write music. Nobody leaves this institution just playing something by ear. They all write, they perform, they play, they encourage each other, they work together in collaborations to put together small ensemble groups. It's kind of amazing to see the interaction. I spend most of my time just trying to keep up with everybody, really. I have to practice like 9 instruments a week every day just to keep up with the kids that are coming through here. And if a new instrument comes through here that I haven't seen in years, I have to work hard to get my chops back up on it so I can teach them, right? And so that's been, for me, kept my mind alive. I've always been afraid as I get older I'd get that, that old people's disease of, having everything, what they call that, having a pregnant moment or a senior moment where things drop out of your head. And so every single day I'm challenged to learn, and I'm challenged to pass it on to others. and I get to see other people's point of view of what I'm doing, and the kids have taught me more about my own system than anybody could have, because they'll do things like turn it upside down, turn it around, try to put it on a window, and they do weird things with it, and it's amazing the inventions that have come out of this thing that I've started doing. I'm just really excited.
Yeah, I mean, so it's like I said, this is something I think it makes common sense, I think, for people. There really shouldn't be this shouldn't be one of these things where the world has to fight about it. We could create a national college, we could create a national high school, and we could videotape it all, put it all on cable TV, and every human being in this country, if they wanted to learn something, they could learn it from the best teachers in the world, all on videotape. We could have, and this is the way it should be free, and I say for kids we should be paying them. So adults should be able to learn for free, and kids should get paid to do it.
You just described what PBS was supposed to be. And they also they weren't commercial. Have you seen a PBS show lately that isn't touting commercials continuously, nonstop, forever and ever? I mean, it's just a shame. That's what public access television was supposed to be about. It was supposed to be about educating and passing on science and literature. I haven't seen, I see things like on chakras and, and aura reading on,
yeah, well, that was always another problem with it. It was publicly financed, but only subsidized, right? So they still were dependent on grant money. They were still dependent on, pleasing some constituency, and so they ended up feeding that constituency. So anybody who had a radical perspective tended to have more influence with public television. You could a rich guy could buy the programming of choice. And not saying that some of it wasn't good, okay? Some Nova, some of these Frontline they did have some integrity in the beginning. But yeah, now it's just serving an audience again. Again, it's serving a special interest, not a social interest. And certainly as an educational platform, they certainly dropped the ball in the sense that they didn't come up with any kind of educational programming for kids older than 5 years old, right? I mean, it just kind of stopped at 5 years old, and we're not going to help you any further. But I don't think anybody could deny that Sesame Street, did kids an awful lot of good. And as a practical matter, if we would have bought it in the first place, I'm saying, if the government would have made it, they would have owned it, and it would have been even cheaper.
That's all the time we have for this conversation for now, but if you would like to see the rest of this chat, please visit either our official VloggerDome website at www.vloggerdome.com or our official VloggerDome YouTube channel, where you can find the entire conversation, other episodes, updates, extras, vlogs, live events, and more. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter, and we will soon be adding more social media sites to the roster as well. VloggerDome would love to hear from our viewers. Do you have a question? A comment? Do you perhaps have a counter-argument to anything proposed or argued in this episode or one of our other episodes? Great! You can respond by text, video, song, artwork, anything. And if we like what you've created, we may even put it in our next episode. So if you have something to share, please do send us a message on any of our sites, or you can email us at oldfan@inmendumarchive.com. Hope to hear from you.
Yeah, a couple of minutes on why it hasn't happened. What are the impediments? Why isn't efficiency something that just happens naturally? Well, you have to say that there's usually a vested interest, somebody's special interest that prevents progress. And I don't want to rag on teachers, but yeah, they have a vested interest in preserving the old system because it pays them very well, and they're just trying to save their own interest. They don't want to have to get a real job, so to speak. And not that teaching isn't work or all that kind of stuff, but it is an archaic kind of work. It's just not something we socially need. We socially need to maximize efficiency. We need to we need to get we need to get kids off the street causing trouble, playing basketball, dreaming of being a sports hero, and instead, thinking about being a productive citizen and acquiring the knowledge it takes to do that, to be able to make a contribution to society. And teachers aren't getting it done. And I don't think it's necessarily their fault in the sense that force feeding doesn't work. It's just a bad idea. It's not the straightest line between the solution to the problem. The idea is you want to get information in the kid's head, and the easiest way to do that is make a kid hungry for it, to give them the incentive to eat it. Forcing it is always going to be more trouble. And we should be there, and the reason why we're not there is because politically there's a special interest that doesn't want it to happen, and you can see that. You can see they want to retain their copyright on knowledge, and they don't want to they don't want to lose their advantage. But it's time for us to say we don't need stagecoach drivers, we don't need blacksmith, and we don't need performance artists called teachers. We need learning mechanisms, and we need a system that pays the right people, pays the people doing the work, which is the student. And we got to get rid of the redundancy and waste in the system.
Want to see what happens to hungry minds when you pay them to learn? Remember, people, carrots, not whips.
So in conclusion, we are systematically disgracing the potential of human beings by doing nothing to effectively and efficiently manufacture the future through proper, modernized, and incentivized education. Educating people in a way that makes sense is literally everything, people. You want to insist on life continuing? You want a civilization? You want to have some kind of a chance at a future? Then let's fix it, because this is not a brokenness we can allow to continue. And the depressing fact that these simple fixes may never come to fruition is just another reason why we are doomed. But try not to doom anyone else as much as possible. Try not to impose as much as possible. Just being alive makes you a taker. Your every happiness paid for with another sentient creature's suffering. You are, in fact, an asshole. Try not to be as much of an asshole as possible. It's extremely important for all of us to understand the myriad ways in which we can in fact be extremely dangerous in this world. Try not to impose as much of that dangerousness on the rest of the world as possible. No matter how small you are, no matter how powerless you are, you will in fact have an impact. Use whatever power you have to minimize the suffering. Please?
Thanks for watching, everybody. Be sure to join us again next month as VloggerDome takes a look at another one of the world's most important problems, the right to die. See you then.